The Unusual Landlady and the Human Tenant. The space station Sci-Fi Prime floated in the deep void of space, a massive hub where dozens of alien species lived together. It was a place of strict rules, high technology, and absolute order. At least that's how Xilara, the building's landlady, liked it. Xilara was a Varxen, a tall, blue-skinned alien with 4 sharp eyes and long, twisting tendrils on her head. She ran her housing complex with an iron fist. She hated chaos, she hated dirt, and most of all, she hated humans. Unfortunately, she had no choice but to rent a unit to one. His name was Jack Carter, a human traveler who had arrived at Sci-Fi Prime a few weeks ago. He had been desperate for a place to stay, and against her better judgment, Xilara had let him rent Unit 7B. From the moment he moved in, things started going wrong. Jack was messy. His room smelled strange. He made loud noises when he ate, and worst of all, he talked too much. Every time she passed by, he would wave and smile, as if they were friends. Xilara hated it. But this morning was the worst. The Sandworm incident. Xilara was doing her daily inspection, checking every tenant's unit to ensure they followed the rules. She hated surprises. She liked everything in perfect order. When she reached Jack's door, she frowned. The smell coming from inside was strange. Ugh, disgusting human habits again. She pressed the access panel. The door slid open, and she stepped inside. The unit was messy, as expected. Clothes were on the floor, food containers were stacked on the table, and a weird human device called a toaster was making a strange ticking sound. Then she saw him. Jack was fresh out of the shower, a towel wrapped around his waist. He was rubbing his hair with another towel, looking half asleep. "Xilara," he said, blinking in surprise. You could knock, you know." Xilara ignored him. She had bigger concerns. Her sharp alien eyes spotted something moving under his towel. It was squirming, wiggling, a long, thin shape, twitching slightly. Xilara froze in horror. Her mind immediately jumped to the worst possible conclusion. It was a sandworm. A tiny, wriggling, parasitic sandworm. Her heart raced. Sandworms were one of the most dangerous creatures on her homeworld. They were small at first, but they could grow inside their host, eating them from the inside out. She let out a blood-curdling scream. "Human, why is there a tiny sandworm between your legs?" Jack flinched, nearly dropping his towel. "Whoa! What are you talking about?" Xilara backed away, pointing a trembling finger at him. "You beroge a parasite into my building. You filthy weak creature." Jack looked confused. Then his face turned bright red. Wait, you think, oh my God, Xilara, no, that's not." But Xilara wasn't listening. She slammed her emergency alarm on the wall. A loud siren blared across the building. CQURITV. Biological contamination. Code red. Jack's eyes widened. "Wait. No, don't call security. I can explain." But it was too late. Within seconds, the hallway filled with armed station guards, their weapons aimed directly at Jack. Xilara pointed at him. "Arrest this disgusting human. He's smuggling dangerous creatures." The guards surrounded Jack, their faces cold and serious. "Sir," one of them said, "we need you to step forward and show us the parasite." Jack groaned. "This is not how I wanted to start my day." The worst interrogation of Jack's life begins. Jack was dragged out of his apartment, still wearing nothing but a towel. Xilara crossed her arms, feeling triumphant. Finally, she would be rid of him. But as the security team prepared to interrogate him, Jack realized he had one big problem. How in the world was he supposed to explain this to a bunch of aliens who didn't understand human biology? The worst day of his life was only just beginning. The most embarrassing explanation in the universe. Jack Carter had been in many awkward situations before, but nothing, absolutely nothing, compared to this. He sat in the middle of intergalactic security holding Cell 14, wrapped in nothing but a thin silver emergency blanket, glaring at the 4 alien officers interrogating him. Across from him, standing rigidly upright, was Xilara, his landlady, arms crossed, 4 eyes glaring, her tendrils twitching in disgust. "This human," she said coldly, "is harboring an illegal, highly dangerous parasite between his legs." Jack groaned. For the last time, it's not a parasite. The lead security officer, a tall reptilian alien named Sergeant Grix, narrowed his glowing yellow eyes. "Human, you will submit to a full bioexamination." Jack's eyes widened. "Wait. Hold on. What do you mean by bioexamination?" Grix tapped a holographic screen. "Standard procedure for biological contaminants. Full body scans, genetic analysis, invasive internal probes if necessary." Jack paled. "I'd rather die." Xilara scoffed. "Typical human male. Always dramatic." Grix ignored them both. "Now, explain, in detail, the nature of this organism." Jack ran a hand over his face, groaning. He had never had to explain this before. How was he supposed to describe it in a way that didn't make things worse? He took a deep breath. "All right, look. This isn't a parasite. It's part of my anatomy." Silara's face contorted in horror. "It's ATTGGDTU." Jack gritted his teeth. "Yes, it's just a normal part of being male." There was a long silence. The security officers all exchanged deeply concerned looks. Sergeant Grix's jaw tightened. "Are you saying this thing is some kind of symbiotic life form?" Jack stared. "What? No, it's not." Grix cut him off, nodding to his officers. "That would explain why it reacts to external stimuli. The human appeared to be in a post-cleaning state when it was discovered. Perhaps it activates during hydration." Xilara shuddered. "Disgusting." Jack threw his hands up. "Oh my God. It's not a separate organism." Xilara raised a brow. "Then what is it?" Jack froze. He opened his mouth, closed it. How did he explain this without making it worse? A beeping sound interrupted them. Grix checked his holo-tablet, then turned back to Jack. "We have analyzed human biological data from the Galactic Archive." Jack sighed in relief. "Finally. Now you can see I'm telling the truth." Grix's yellow eyes flickered as he read the data, his scaly brow furrowed. This can't be right." Xilara frowned. "What?" The reptilian officer's voice dropped to a whisper. "According to human anatomy records, this appendage is used for reproduction." Silence. Jack felt his soul leave his body. Silara's tendrils stood on end. Her pupils shrank. The security officers took a step back, as if Jack were about to explode. One of them gagged. "Unclean," the officer muttered. Silara's face twisted in absolute revulsion. She turned to the guards. "I demand he be immediately evicted and permanently banned from Sci-Fi Prime." Jack's eyes snapped open. "What?" "Over a misunderstanding." Xilara pointed a sharp blue finger at him. "I don't allow biological weapons in my building, human." Jack facepalmed. "It's not a weapon." Sergeant Grix sighed. "Eviction protocol must be approved by a tribunal. The human has 24 hours to prepare his case." Xilara hissed in frustration. "Fine, but I promise you, I will see this human gone." Jack groaned, rubbing his temples. This was not how he expected his week to go. Now he had one day to convince a room full of aliens that his own body wasn't a public threat. And judging by Xilara's expression, she would rather throw him out of an airlock than let him win. The court battle begins. Jack needed a plan. If he lost this case, he'd be kicked off the station forever. He had 24 hours to prove that his anatomy was not illegal, not dangerous, and definitely not a biological weapon. And worst of all, his only chance of winning might involve explaining human mating habits to an entire alien courtroom. He was so screwed. Eviction battle. Human versus alien laws. Jack Carter sat in the cold, sterile courtroom of Zephyra Prime, staring at the three-eyed alien judge who looked like a giant sea slug. This was by far the worst day of his life. Behind him, a small audience of aliens whispered among themselves, clearly disturbed by the dangerous human anatomy scandal that had shaken the station. Across from him, Scylla stood tall, arms crossed, looking smug. "This case is simple," she declared. "The human possesses an unregistered biological weapon. He must be evicted." Jack groaned. "It's not a weapon." Judge Uxlar, an elderly blue-skinned alien with tentacle-like appendages on his chin, raised a hand for silence. His three eyes blinked slowly as he spoke. "Human, you stand accused of concealing a potentially dangerous organism." Jack rubbed his temples. "For the last time, it's not an organism. It's part of me." The judge held up a tentacle. Yes, we are aware of your claims. However, as Zephyra Prime is a multi-species station, all biological anomalies must be registered. If your appendage is found to be a potential hazard, you will be forcibly removed from the station. Jack's stomach dropped. "Great, so now my own body needs a permit." Scylla stepped forward, smirking. "I would like to call in an expert witness to confirm that the human's growth is a biological threat." Jack snorted. "Oh, this should be good." The doors slid open, and in walked a massive 8-foot-tall alien in a crisp white lab coat. His skin was a dark shade of green, and he had 4 glowing yellow eyes stacked vertically down his face. Jack instantly disliked him. "This is Dr. Vrolok, one of the leading xenobiologists in the galaxy," Scylla said. "He has studied thousands of species." Dr. Vrolok nodded gravely and turned to the judge. "I have reviewed the case file, and I must say, this is one of the most disturbing discoveries I have ever encountered." Jack groaned. "Oh, come on." The scientist pulled up a holographic display and pointed at an image of the human reproductive system, labeled with giant red danger signs. The audience gasped in horror. One alien fainted. Jack's face burned. "This so-called appendage," Dr. Vrolok continued, "is unlike anything we have seen before. It contains an internal pressurization system, capable of expanding and contracting at will." The audience murmured nervously. Jack facepalmed. "It's not a weapon." Dr. Vrolok ignored him and zoomed in further. "Not only that, but this structure is capable of releasing millions of microscopic life forms, which have the potential to spread rapidly." An alien in the audience screamed. Scylla smirked. "Exactly. If this thing were to be weaponized, it could be a catastrophic event." Jack shot up from his seat. "Are you serious? It's literally just." Judge Uxlar held up a tentacle hand. "Enough." Jack took a deep breath. He needed to turn this case around. Fast. Jack's counterattack. Jack sat back down, trying to think. If these aliens were this confused about human biology, maybe he could use that to his advantage. He leaned forward, his voice calm and serious. "Your Honor, let's take a step back. You're all acting like I'm some kind of ticking time bomb. But let me ask you, has my anomaly ever harmed anyone?" The room fell silent. Jack continued. "In fact, humans have lived peacefully among alien species for centuries. If this was truly a biohazard, wouldn't there have been incidents before now?" The judge rubbed his chin tentacles, considering this. Scylla scowled. "That is not the point. This is about regulations." Jack smirked. "Oh, I see. This isn't about science. It's about bureaucracy." Scylla's eyes narrowed. "You." Jack turned back to the judge. "Tell me, Your Honor, are there any actual rules about human anatomy being illegal?" Judge Uxlar hesitated. "Well, No. Jack grinned. Then you can't evict me based on a non-existent law. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Lara looked furious. The final test. Judge Uxlar sighed. Very well. As there are no regulations against human biology, I cannot issue an eviction. Jack fist pumped. Yes. However, the judge continued, before we dismiss the case, I propose one final test to determine whether this appendage is a threat. Jack's stomach dropped. Test. He repeated cautiously. The judge nodded. A biological compatibility test. If your structure is deemed safe by our scanning procedures, you may remain. Lara smiled. Oh, I love this idea. Jack gulped. What exactly does this test involve? Dr. Vrolok tapped on his holographic screen, displaying a large, fluffy alien creature with big round eyes and soft, glowing fur. This is a furlock, one of the most biologically sensitive species in the galaxy, he explained. If the human's anatomy is truly safe, then physical contact with a furlock will produce no reaction. Jack blinked. Wait, so you want me to be sniffed by an alien guinea pig? Dr. Vrolok nodded. Correct. Lara smirked. Unless you're afraid. Jack clenched his jaw. Oh, bring it on, you overgrown jellyfish. Courtroom chaos and the unexpected test. Jack Carter sat in the middle of an alien courtroom, staring at a tiny, fluffy creature inside a floating glass pod, a furlock, the most biologically sensitive species in the galaxy. He was about to be sniff tested by a space hamster to prove that his anatomy wasn't a biological weapon. This was, without a doubt, the dumbest moment of his life. Across from him, Lara, his four-eyed alien landlady, watched with cold satisfaction. Judge Uxlar tapped his tentacle fingers on the podium. Dr. Vrolok, proceed with the compatibility test. The scientist, a towering reptilian alien with glowing yellow eyes, adjusted his sterile gloves and activated the containment pod. The glass lifted, and the furlock floated gently toward Jack. Jack frowned. So, what exactly happens if it doesn't like me? Dr. Vrolok tapped his tablet. Furlocks react negatively to dangerous biological entities. If it senses a contaminant, it will scream. Jack raised an eyebrow. Scream. Very loudly. Jack scoffed. Theft. What's the worst that can? The furlock took one sniff of him. And then, S-K-R-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E-E. The entire courtroom shook with the sound of a soul-piercing alien screech. Jack flinched so hard he fell backward. Lara grinned. The security guards reached for their weapons. Judge Uxlar's tentacle beard bristled. The furlock has spoken. The human is a biological threat. Jack jumped up. Wait. This isn't fair. Maybe it just doesn't like my shampoo. Dr. Vrolok took notes on his tablet. Or perhaps your appendage emits pheromones that trigger a defensive reaction. Jack groaned. Oh, come on. Lara folded her arms. I believe this proves my point. Evict the human immediately. Jack gritted his teeth. Oh yeah. Let's run that test again. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Uxlar blinked all three of his bulbous eyes. Again? Jack pointed at the fluffy alien ball, still twitching in fear. Maybe the furlock was reacting to something else in the room. How do we know this wasn't just a fluke? Lara narrowed her eyes. You're stalling. Jack crossed his arms. I demand a second test, with a different furlock. Judge Uxlar sighed. Very well. Bring in another. A second furlock was brought in, this one slightly smaller, with a soft blue glow around its fur. Jack took a deep breath. The furlock floated toward him, sniffed, and then, Murph. The furlock let out a tiny, delighted purring sound. The audience gasped. Dr. Vrolok's glowing eyes widened. Fascinating. This one reacts positively to the human. Judge Uxlar frowned. How is that possible? Jack smirked. Maybe furlocks have preferences just like people. Some like me, some don't. Dr. Vrolak muttered to himself, tapping his tablet furiously. This could indicate genetic compatibility variants, or perhaps an anomaly in human scent receptors. Silara hissed in frustration. You're twisting the results. Jack leaned forward. Or maybe you just don't want to admit you were wrong. Silara's tendrils twitched. You. Judge Uxler raised a hand. Enough. The test results are inconclusive. Silara's face darkened. This isn't over. Jack gave her a mocking salute. Can't wait for round 2, Landlady. The final challenge awaits. Judge Uxler sighed. Since the results remain unclear, I propose one final challenge before a verdict is reached. Jack groaned. Oh great. What now? The judge gestured to the security guards. If you are to live peacefully on Zafira Prime, you must prove that your anatomy is not a hazard. Therefore, you will undergo a direct physical compatibility test with a member of another species. Jack froze. What? Judge Uxlar's tentacles curled in a grin. You will have to live with an alien roommate for one full cycle, and if they report any strange biological activity, you will be permanently banned. Jack's stomach dropped. Oh, you have got to be kidding me. Judge Uxlar turned to Xilara. Since you are the one pressing charges, I see no better candidate than you. Silara's face turned pale. Jack's jaw dropped. What? They both shouted at the same time. The judge smiled. Congratulations, you two are now roommates. The most awkward scientific experiment ever. Jack Carter stared at the official housing reassignment notice on his tablet, his brain short-circuiting. Roommate. XELARIVARXDAN. DURASHIAN. 1. Thafulol CYCL. 30 standard days. Terms. Any biological ananomaly will result in immediate. He slowly turned his head to look at Silara, who was standing beside him, her 4 eyes twitching in barely contained rage. You, she hissed, are not stepping foot in my living quarters. Jack let out a breath and gave her a smug grin. Hey, not my call. Judge's orders. Silara clenched her gloved fists. I will not tolerate human filth contaminating my space. Jack smirked. Then you'd better start liking me real fast, Landlady. Before Silara could strangle them, a beeping sound echoed through the station's corridors. Jack turned to see a group of scientists in white lab coats approaching. Leading them was none other than Dr. Vrolak, his 4 glowing eyes scanning Jack like he was a lab specimen. Oh, great, Jack muttered. The nerds are here. Dr. Vrolak clasped his hands together. Ah, excellent. You two are just in time for the final examination. Silara narrowed her eyes. Final examination. Dr. Vrolak nodded. Before we allow this human to integrate into Varxan society, we must run a few more tests, for safety, of course. Jack threw up his hands. What now? You want another fluffy hamster to sniff me? Vrolak smiled. Oh no, this time we require something more direct. The experiment begins. Jack and Silara were escorted. The cold problem. The chair beneath Jack lit up, and suddenly a wave of freezing air blasted down from above. Jack shivered violently as his breath turned to mist. Oh my, what the hell? Dr. Vrolak checked his datapad. Ah, fascinating. Human tissue remains functional at sub-zero temperatures. However, note the excessive vocal protests. Silara raised an eyebrow. So he just complains a lot. Jack gritted his teeth. I'm about to complain a whole lot louder. Dr. Vrolak nodded. Proceed to test 2. The cold suddenly disappeared, only to be replaced by intense heat. Jack let out a choked gasp. Oh, come on. The scientist took notes while he sweated profusely, struggling against the heat wave. Dr. Vrolak tapped his chin. Curious. Humans react very poorly to rapid temperature changes. But the anatomy seems surprisingly resilient. Jack, gasping for breath, wiped his forehead. Yeah, thanks. Glad I could help. Silara rolled her eyes. Enough of these basic tests. If we're testing compatibility, we should see how he interacts with a Varkson directly. Jack froze. Dr. Vrolok grinned. A marvelous idea. Jack turned to Silara. You just made this worse for yourself, you know. Silara smirked. We'll see. Direct contact. The scientists cleared the room, leaving only Jack and Silara standing a few feet apart. Dr. Vrolok's voice echoed through the intercom. This final test will analyze physical compatibility between human and Varkson anatomy. Jack blinked. Define physical compatibility. A mechanical voice answered. NITYAT in phase E1. Proximity test. Jack frowned. What the hell is a? The floor beneath him glowed, forming a bright green circle. A second circle lit up beneath Silara. Dr. Vrolok explained. As long as you two stay within close range, we will monitor how your bodies react to one another. Silara snorted. Please, as if I would react to a primitive mammal. Jack rolled his eyes. Oh yeah. Then why do you keep stepping back? Silara stiffened. She hadn't even realized she had instinctively moved a few inches away from him. Jack smirked. What's wrong, landlady? Scared I'll contaminate you? She glared. You wish, human. Suddenly, the mechanical voice announced the next phase. NITE8 phase 2. Direct TCO and tasty. Jack's grin disappeared. Wait, hold on. The floor beneath him flashed red, and a robotic arm suddenly extended from the ceiling, pushing Jack forward, right into Silara. The two of them collided, with Jack's hands instinctively grabbing her arms to steady himself. For the first time ever, Silara froze completely. Her tendrils stiffened. Her four eyes widened. The room fell silent. Dr. Vrolok's voice crackled over the speakers. Fascinating. Silara's body temperature just spiked by 3 degrees. Jack blinked. Silara yanked her arms back, looking absolutely horrified. That is not possible. Jack smirked. Well. Looks like someone's reacting. Silara stepped back quickly, her tendrils twitching wildly. Shut up. Jack crossed his arms. Oh no, I think we need more tests, don't you, Doc? Silara hissed. I will end you. Dr. Vrolok tapped his notes. This may require extended observation. Silara groaned, realizing what that meant. Jack grinned. The next 30 days were going to be fun. The roommate wars begin. Jack and Silara were now forced to live together. And Silara would have to prove she could survive without reacting to human biology. Jack had one mission: make her life as difficult as possible. And judging by the way she was still flustered, he was already winning. Silara's final test and a surprising discovery. Silara Varkson had survived alien wars, asteroid storms, and a 7-hour bureaucracy meeting on intergalactic zoning laws. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared her for living with a human. Jack Carter was a walking disaster. In just 3 days of their forced roommate arrangement, he had left strange human grooming products all over the bathroom, cooked something that smelled like burning fuel and called it bacon, worn nothing but loose human sleepwear around the apartment, making her uncomfortably aware of his bizarre mammalian warmth. Worst of all, he kept smiling at her. She hated it. And yet, that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was that her body was reacting to him. Scientifically impossible, completely unacceptable, and absolutely happening. Every time she got too close, she felt it, a strange warmth creeping under her skin. At first, she thought it was a malfunction in her environmental controls. But no, it only happened when Jack was nearby. And thanks to Judge Uxlar's absurd compatibility test, she was stuck living with him for 30 full days. So when the next official scan was scheduled, she prepared the only logical defense: resisting human influence. Solara stood in the testing chamber, arms crossed, glaring at the floating scanner drone in front of her. Dr. Vrolak adjusted his notes. "This will be a simple test, Miss Solara. You will stand in proximity to the human, while we analyze your biological responses." Solara nodded sharply. "Understood." Jack leaned against the wall, grinning. "You sure you can handle this, landlady?" She rolled her 4 eyes. "Please, your existence is barely tolerable, let alone influential." Jack smirked. "We'll see." Dr. Vrolak tapped his tablet. Proceeding with the test, human approached the Varkson. Jack stepped forward. Solara remained perfectly still. The scanner whirred, analyzing her biosignatures. So far, no reaction. She let out a silent breath. Then Jack tilted his head and smirked. "You know, for someone who hates me, you sure do stare a lot." Solara's tendrils twitched. The scanner beeped. Dr. Vrolak's eyes widened. Curious, small but measurable physiological shift. Solara stiffened. "What? That's not possible." Dr. Vrolak adjusted the settings. "Let's try closer proximity. Human, move forward." Jack stepped into her personal space. Solara's body locked up. Too close. Too warm. His scent, clean, faintly metallic from the station's air filters, mixed with something else uniquely human. The scanner beeped faster. Dr. Vrolak looked fascinated. Significant increase in neural activity. Solara felt her face heat up. Jack grinned. "Huh. Looks like you're not as immune to human biology as you thought." Solara gritted her teeth. "This is a trick." Jack leaned in slightly. "Sure it is." The scanner blared an alert. Dr. Vrolak gasped. "Incredible. Solara's body temperature has risen by 4 degrees. Solara's entire face darkened. Jack laughed. "Oh, this is gold." Solara's tendrils flared in fury. She grabbed him by the collar of his ridiculous human shirt and yanked him forward. "Listen to me, you insufferable mammal. I do not. Do note. React to humans." Jack, still grinning, raised an eyebrow. "Aha. Then why are you still holding me?" Solara realized her mistake. She dropped him instantly and spun to face Dr. Vrolak. "Your stupid scanner is faulty." Dr. Vrolak adjusted his glasses. "Actually, I believe this proves human Varkson biological interactions are far more complex than we thought." Jack crossed his arms. "In other words, I win." Solara snarled. "You win nothing." Dr. Vrolak tapped his tablet. "Regardless, we must proceed to the final phase." Solara glared. "There's more." Dr. Vrolak smiled. "Oh yes, and this time it involves social bonding." Jack's grin widened. "Oh, this just keeps getting better." Solara was going to kill someone. The worst possible outcome. Jack and Solara stood side by side, reading the new official document from Judge Uxlar. Ni mandati. Human and Varxan mused complete a social bonding activity to prove long-term comopatibility. Failability to prioritize AAT. While result in EVIC2N. Solara's eye twitched. "This cannot be happening." Jack grinned. "Oh, it's happening, landlady." Solara threw the tablet at his head. The unlikely bond and a hilarious ending. Jack Carter had survived forced scientific testing, alien misunderstandings, and nearly being evicted over his own anatomy. But now he was facing the ultimate horror, a mandatory social bonding activity. With Solara. For 1 full day. Jack read the official tribunal order again, just to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Mandatory social bonding activity. As IGND pair. Human. Jack Carter. And Varkson. Silara Varkson. Duration. 24 hours. TSK. Engage in at least one culturally significant activity together. FALURE to PARTISA AT. Waril RECULT in ITMNEDEVACTIN. Jack slowly turned his head to look at Silara. She stood stiffly beside him, her 4 eyes scanning the document like she was trying to burn it with sheer willpower. "No," she said flatly. Jack grinned. "Oh yeah." Silara closed her eyes. "I refuse." Jack folded his arms. "If you don't do it, I get kicked out." She exhaled sharply. "Then perhaps that is the correct outcome." Jack placed a hand over his heart. "Wow. That hurts, landlady." "Really?" she hissed. Judge Uxlar's voice boomed over the station's announcement system. "Your assigned activity is Human Cultural Experience Night." Jack's smirk grew. Silara's eye twitched. "What does that mean?" Judge Uxlar continued. "The human will select a traditional bonding experience from his homeworld and engage in it with the Varkson." Jack lit up. "Oh, I love this." Silara narrowed her eyes. "I already hate it." The movie night from hell. Jack had one chance to make this as unbearable as possible for Silara. So he picked something humans did best. Something slow, emotional, and incredibly dramatic. He picked a romantic movie. 10 minutes into the movie, Silara sat stiffly on the couch, arms crossed, glaring at the holographic projection in front of her. On the screen, 2 human actors were staring longingly at each other under the rain. Jack chewed popcorn with satisfaction. "So, how do you like it?" Silara's tendrils twitched. "This is the most inefficient form of communication I have ever seen." Jack grinned. "That's romance, baby." Silara huffed. "Why do they not simply state their intentions?" Jack threw up his hands. "Because it's about the tension. The slow burn. The build-up." Silara tilted her head. "They are wasting an unnecessary amount of time." Jack sighed. "Okay, fine. What do Varksons do for bonding?" Silara shrugged. "We enter combat arenas and challenge each other to duels." Jack blinked. "That explains so much." She smirked. "Would you like a demonstration?" Jack held up his hands. "Nope. I'm good. Just keep watching." The emotional scene. The characters on screen were now crying in each other's arms. Silara scoffed. "Humans produce an excessive amount of moisture for emotional responses." Jack chuckled. "We call it crying." She shook her head. "It is inefficient." Jack smirked. "Says the species that solves its problems with random knife fights." Silara glared at him. "At least our method is direct." Jack turned back to the screen. "Yeah, well, sometimes a little emotional suffering is good for the soul." She rolled her eyes. "And yet, you claim my people are dramatic." The unexpected reaction. The movie was reaching its climax. The music swelled. The couple was finally confessing their feelings. Jack turned to Silara, waiting for her sarcastic comment. Instead, she was watching. Not glaring, not scoffing. Actually watching. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Wait, are you enjoying this?" Silara immediately stiffened. "No," she said too quickly. Jack's grin widened. "Oh my God. You are. You're into this." She hissed. Silence. Jack leaned closer. "Silara, do you have feelings?" She grabbed a throw pillow and launched it at his head. The unexpected aftermath. The next morning, Jack woke up to find an anonymous request on his station account. Request RECIVG. Recommend additional human cultural experiences. Jack smirked. Silara was so busted.